Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for being here at tonight's event sponsored by the Center for Politics and the People, and also the League of Women Voters of the Ripon area. I would like to thank the League for their support in setting up this event. I am Henrik Schatzinger, director of the center, and I'm also a professor of political science. Thank you again for your attendance, and we look forward to your participation this evening. Today, we are fortunate to welcome George Penn, who is a citizen leader with Wisconsin United to Amend. WIUTA is a cross-partisan state network dedicated to restoring our democracy by minimizing the corruptive influence that money can have on our politics. To quote from their website, we seek to overturn Citizens United and related Supreme Court decisions so we may reclaim the liberties and privileges guaranteed in the US Constitution for real people. Over 840 communities across the US have already passed resolutions calling for a constitutional amendment, including over 160 governments in Wisconsin and 22 state legislatures. George Penn grew up in Madison and attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He joined Wisconsin United to Amend in 2012, working on the ratification on the 28th Amendment to get big money out of politics. After WIUTA became a chapter of American Promise, Penn began to train other chapter leaders in activist incubation and lobbying strategies with American Promise. He has helped pass more than 130 resolutions across the state, and he has worked nationally with American Promise to support the 28th Amendment movement. George Penn will give a short presentation, followed by a discussion between him and myself, and then a question and answer session will follow. Please join me in welcoming George Penn.
Dr. Schatzinger, and thank you for allowing me to speak at this forum here. I usually don't have a microphone in me, so if it goes down here and you can't hear me, tell me, microphone, or just yell out if I let it slide down, because I'm into this stuff and I don't think about this stuff. Thank you. Right there, she caught me already. All right, so as one sense, Wisconsin United, he mixed it into the conversation here. Is a nonpartisan group that's working to get big money out of politics by passing a constitutional amendment to the U.S. Constitution to allow us to get big money out of politics. That's what we do. There's a bigger movement here, and if you look over here, you're going to see a little sign in purple that says "Let's fix this." That's a bigger movement. So, there's people working on fair maps. Some of you might know about that. Redistricting, voting rights. There's all kinds of reforms we need. But we focus on getting an amendment and work with those groups. I shut my business down in 2012 of 20 years to do this full time. I will do this till I can do this no longer because of this guy. This guy is my grandson. His name is Nicky. I see a country that's in deep trouble. I believe we're headed toward autocracy. And you're going to see that I believe we don't have a democracy, and I'm telling you why here anymore. And I see, actually, most of you, he's a teen now. This one's to get you endorphins going, okay? But he's a teen, and I'm doing this for him, and by proxy, I'm doing it for all you students who are just a little older than him, because you are going to be facing it. If we're right, those of us who believe we're in trouble, you're going to be facing a problem if we don't fix it. So that's my motivation to get it fixed. Now, nobody cares, the general public, oh, you want to fix democracy? Yeah, I got to go to the park or play my video game. But people care about issues, right? We all have some issue. I'd like you to take 1 second, and I'm going to just shut up for 1 second. What's your most important issue to you that you would like to see better handled? To yourself, okay? Now, if you're a teacher, you might care about the education most. If you're a doctor or a nurse, you might care about healthcare. I myself started my business to address climate change. I was a nuclear engineer, turned into an energy engineer, and worked on that. So you have identified, I hope, in yourself what your issue is. Now my question that comes up is this: how's that going? Right? You care about schools. How about now they're trying to not pay the college professors because they don't like the way they talk? Right? How's education going? If you're a nurse, how's healthcare going? My point here is, I bet $10 to 1, if I was a gambler, and I'm not, that most of you said it's not going well. So nothing's working in this country, and that's a problem. So the premise that we work on is, we're not going to get those going better until we have our democracy working better. And we believe that we have to work on it to get our democracy back. And we believe that unless we get big money out of politics, I can maybe exaggerate a little bit and say, democracy gone. I believe we're moving in that direction, that if it's not turned around. And this is why I work full time on this for the last 12 years, and I hope another 12, if I can. Right? And so, because this is a critical thing, there's got a lot of things that have to change. But if this one doesn't happen, none of the others are even doable, even if we win them, because of the way the system's running. Now, the simplest way to talk about the problem that as we see here is, how can your politicians represent you when they're given millions to represent someone else? Now, I've been using this slide for 12 years. I don't use millions now, we're talking tens of millions now. This was millions when I started. Now it's tens of millions to hundreds of millions, and I'm going to give you some examples, a little bit of that. So this is the issue right here. We have to get them to represent us. Now, Professor Schatzinger, recently, this is 2020, I think, this book, right? Talked about, you can't read the red stuff here, it's too small, but money and how it impacts our politics and how it impacts our country. So if you want to find the background, I'm not going to talk a lot about the history. Unfortunately, for 20 minutes, I can't get into history, things. But there's books like this that take different pieces of the problem. You can learn about this history and stuff by reading those things. I'm an implementer. I'm an engineer. An engineer says, what's the problem I want to solve, and how do I solve it? So I become no longer a nuclear or energy engineer, I'm a social engineer. And I want to find out the problem is fixing our democracy, how do we fix it? So I want to talk about the solution, how we get a little bit about what it is and what's the problem, and the solution, and what we have to do this. Now, anybody here has not heard Citizens United, especially young people, it was long before, it was 2010. Anybody would be willing to say they've never heard it if they haven't? All right, I'm not going to go into it. Basically, Supreme Court that got us into the big money. So I'm going to start with that premise, without telling you the history of that. You see the red line here, and that's Citizens United was in January 2010. And before that, there wasn't much money, but we have what's called, we're mostly college students here, college educated, exponential growth. Exponential growth is not a good thing in some ways. Some days it's good. If you got money in the bank, it's good, right? But it's not good for corruption, right? So this chart is to show you nothing but how much it's gone up in up till 2020. Didn't have any other data. So that's a longer term, but let's look at recently. Total federal spending in these two presidential races here, 2016 and 2020. The amount spent on total federal races in a presidential year doubled in one election. Now, back in 2012 when I was doing this and we hit the 5 and 6 and 7 billion, we're saying, holy God, how much school and healthcare, whatever could you do with this money? And then boom, we get blown away, we get a double to 14 in one election cycle. That's scary, if you can see what it's causing. But let's take it more close to home here. Let's talk about Supreme Court cases, right? The record in 2022, and I had this data, the record cost for running a Supreme Court case was, Illinois in 2005, was $15 million. Now, Supreme Courts are supposed to be nonpartisan. Why would you need all this money if they're nonpartisan? The answer, I propose, is they are partisan now. Our state Supreme Court certainly is, and so is the national, and maybe not all states, but I think both of these two Supreme Courts are polarized now, unfortunately for our country. The second largest amount in the country by 2002 was 2022 was Wisconsin's race, Supreme Court race we had in 2020, and that was 10 million in Wisconsin. Now, the population of Wisconsin is about 1/2 the population of Illinois. So I say, per capita, we kicked their ass at 20 million. So you can see, we're talking about a lot of money, in depending on how much. But let's consider the $10 million that was spent on that. Now, you all voted. It looks like you're all voting age, so you all voted probably for this last Supreme Court case, race. Anybody know how much was spent? Katie, you don't tell, I know you know it. So, anybody know how much was spent on that race?
60 million.
16?
60.
60. Anybody else? Very close. $51 million. 5 times 3 years ago for a Supreme Court race. I'm getting the chills thinking this kind of corruption that to buy, right? Money, people say, George, you know, both parties win with the other spending the money. It's not the money the problem, it's that we don't get represented because of the money. That's the problem by each party. So that's a blowaway. 5 times as much in one race after the other. That should blow your mind, blows mine. So who do politicians represent? My proposition is the problem here with money is not that it gets spent, it's good for the economy probably, but the problem is that you become holden, and if you want to get reelected, you better give them what they want. That's my theory. Let's see what Princeton and Northwestern found out. They did a study that looked at 1,800 laws between the 1980 and 20-year period, and they asked a basic question. Who wanted these laws passed, these 1,800 laws, or each law, right? Did they want the citizens? Did the citizens want this law passed because it's good for our society? Or did the corporations at least want these laws passed for what their special interest is? So that was the question they asked, and from the perspective of the citizens, they found that if 10% of the citizens wanted a law passed, there was 30% chance that it would be passed. If 95% of us wanted a law passed, 32%. Now, I'm an engineer and we use statistics, and that's called no correlation between what you want and what you get. That's what that means.
At what level were those laws? Were those state, local, federal?
I can't remember that. Yeah, 1,800 of them, I think it has to be more than federal.
All federal?
Yeah.
Good, well, you knew that good. So you know the study, and you know more about the study than I do, so thank you for covering me on that one. Thank you for asking, right? Now I know it. So, so that's what they found there. So then what about for the elites, corporations and the rich? If 10% of them want it, it's still 10%. If 95% want it, 62%. That's called strong positive correlation. You want it, you get it. And when we have these kind of graphs, what that says to me is that we are not represented. Period. These people are represented because they pay for the elections. And again, if I want to run against, I take $1 million from somebody, corporation or a rich guy, they're going to say, here's what I need from you. I don't give it to them. I don't get that million again. It's that simple. Right? They're blocked. This is our problem. And this is, you know, we're not partisan. I don't care about which party you believe in. This is a systems problem we got fixed. Let's not try to say it's the other party. It's the system that needs to be fixed. And that's why I talk about it's going to be us that's going to fix it. And here's a statement, the sentence that was in the summary of the report. The preferences of the American appear not to have only a minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact. So they're basically double redundancy. Why did they have to have double redundancy there? I suppose it's because they wanted to make sure you understood. We're not represented. If you don't understand the graphs, I hope you understand the words. And so this is in their report, all right? So this is where we are. I think we're in trouble if we don't do something. Let's put that aside and say, can we prevent it? How do we prevent this? How do we, what can we do to try to turn this around? What we have to do is we have to have a national state-by-state movement. We've had movements in the past. I've been still studying, I'm a strong studier of the last reform movement of the 19 to 1920s that we had. And we're here again, 100 and something years ago, later, 120 years later. And we need to build a movement to get that big money out of politics. The parties are not going to work on that. It's working for them. Right? They're winning their elections. They go in their cycles and stuff. They're winning. So what do we have to do? I'm repeating here because that's what education is: repeat. So they get the point. We need to restore our democracy to the people. That's what we have to do. And to do that, we need to get the big money out of politics. That's what we have to do for this movement. And how do we do this? We have to have an amendment. I didn't go into the history here, and I'm going to be talking about the language of this amendment, but it's going to take a constitutional amendment because Citizens United is the Supreme Court saying we can't limit money. Therefore, we have to change the story by clarifying something in the Constitution. And this is the language in the Constitution. It is simplified of the language. This is on the resolutions that I talk about here. I'm going to talk about in a second. So we have to have basically two things. Only human beings are endowed with constitutional rights. Only flesh and blood human beings should have constitutional rights. Two, money is not speech. Therefore, limiting contributions and spending is not limiting speech. And that word up the top, clarified, is underlined because we're not looking to change the Constitution. We're looking to tell the Supreme Court, you got it wrong. And that's been done 3 times before. Supreme Court's rulings, we had amendments because of Supreme Court rulings. Right? So we have 27 amendments. Those of you who have studied it recently, 3 of those were to turn over Supreme Court decisions. This is the same thing, to clarify to the Supreme Court that these things should be this way. Now, so how are we doing this? We're going community. We're building a grassroots movement. That's got to be at the community, and it's got to be at the political level, but that's another a bunch of people that are working on that. We're working, and the map here is the same map here. We so far have passed all along around the state, and we're getting more. I've got a couple more coming in. Just had one last night, actually. So we go with community, and our primary strategy is to get municipal agencies, right, your town, your city, village, county, to pass a resolution telling our state we want them to call for a constitutional amendment. That's our work, right? Working with the communities, with people like you in those communities that do the work. I've been involved in at least 150 or 160 of those, and I passed none of them. I worked with somebody in each community. By the way, you can't see it here, but Ripon is on that list. You guys voted on it.
2014.
Thank you, Katie knows when. 2014, you voted on this. So 170 communities, asking them to call for the amendment. And it has a map of what we've done here. 171 as of last night. No, let's say Wednesday. It was Monday night, 2 nights ago. Katie knows because Katie worked with a local person to get that done, just for chance, right? Near Nina. So 171 each year. We get more of them passed, and that's what we've been doing for 13 years now. Now this is a national movement, or it's no movement at all, right? We are a part. We are playing a role. And if you look at the bottom here, you can see that nationally, 840 of these resolutions that call on their state to call for a constitutional amendment. So we're all getting at the same purpose, even though each state has its own personality and way of doing things. So it is a national movement that we're working part of. And from this work so far, 22 states have called for this amendment. Now, I'm not going to go into, unless you ask me in the Q&A, how do we get amendments, what are the paths, Article 5 of the Constitution, but 22 states have made this call, and I will tell you that the important number you need is, we need to get to 34 to force the issue. They will ignore us until we have 34 states. So that's one number that's important here. So Wisconsin is not one of these, and our first main goal is to get Wisconsin on this list. That's why we're trying to get help from citizens like you. Now, we're not just getting municipal resolutions, we're building a movement in many ways, and we have to engage all communities in our society. We're working with faith communities. Now, there's a good week here. On Sunday, the Grace Lutheran in Kenosha passed our faith community, our faith resolution. So we're working with the faith communities. We have 11 faith communities that have passed a resolution calling for this, 85 nationally. And so I'm on a national interfaith caucus for the amendment. And so I'm working with people around the country to get the faith community in there. So faith communities, small businesses know that they're not winners where we're going. A couple of small businesses I went to said, George, I'd love to do it, but I can't take the chance. This corporation that buys my stuff. I'm afraid, George. Small businesses are not winners. We want to get them involved. And then all kinds of segments of society, education organizations. I'm here today because Professor Schatzinger, I was going to get that your name tough for me still. I had to do it a whole bunch more times. Has, you know, he sees the value, right, of us talking about what do we do about it when all these books come out and say, here's the problem we have to fix. I'm here to talk about what we do about it, and that's why he invited me today, to give you that a better look at the system. I've been on the, I want to say agenda, or curriculum. I've been on the curriculum in 2 high schools talking at the social study classes in Lodi and Parabus, so the teachers who teach that class got me in there. And I've been to a lot of Rotary Optimists and the other service clubs. So my first ask to you, because I'm here to ask, right, do you know anybody who's at UW who teaches this stuff, or in a high school teaches this stuff, and would you ask them to come talk to me and let me get on the curriculums in universities and schools? Or do you know people with any service clubs? So this is how we build a movement, is to do those things. And so it's not just municipal, though that's the dominant piece. That's that. Bottom line is that we need to continue educating the public. I'm here to educate and ask of you. And then we need to build power, and those are overlapping things. They're not exactly the same, but they are overlapping. This is what we do as an organization that is building the movement within this, among the citizens. And so I imagine most of you have watched The Matrix. I've only seen the first one. I know they had more. But in that Matrix, the guy who's the reform leader, Mobius or something like that, he's there talking to Neo, the hero, right? And he's saying, I offer you the blue pill and the red pill. You take the red pill, and the story's over. You'll wake up tomorrow in your cubicle. Remember, it's set up, they were all, your brains were hooked up to wires, and they were taking the energy out of these. That's what the movie was about. You'll wake up in your cubicle tomorrow and not remember this ever happened, and be happy in the world you're at, if you like that. You take the blue pill, and you're going to be learning so much more about the problem we have with the reality. This is not the reality that you want to see. But you're going to end up in a position where you are going to have to either do something or use cognitive dissonance to find a way not to do something. And as I close, I say to you, I'm asking you to take the blue pill and help fix this country. Now, right there at the bottom, in some small way, right? Every one of us can do in some small way that I could tell you a small way you can, but I don't have time because I've got 1 minute left here. And in the Q&A, you can ask me what ways could people do it, because I can tell you, I don't care. If you're here, you could do it. And even if you're not here and you can't get off of a chair, you could do something for me. but you can do a lot more if you want to. So I close that and I say, I love these students in the world. I want a better world for them. And because I love my grandson. And I think we as a society either turn this around, or I just don't want to think about what his world looks like. That's my driver. I take the stage back over to, Professor Schatzinger. I want you to see that picture. Okay, thank you. The new format for me.
Yeah, I just thought we're going to mix it up today a little bit. Obviously, this is a topic near and dear to my heart, and I am currently working on a new book on this topic, and I hope to finish it next year. And my new focus is more on looking at the impact of Citizens United at the local level. So looking at mayoral races, city council, school board elections. So I have lots of data, and I've also had some students who have helped me along the way, so I certainly appreciate that. And we have a wonderful summer research program here at Ripon College, which has made it possible. So thank you for the administration and to our Dean of Faculty who has been supporting this program. So now to my questions. You answered my first question, basically. I was just curious to hear more about what really drives you, what motivates you, given your career background. And you are certainly addressed that, looking at the next generation and what they have to face. So let's focus more on the solutions aspect. I'm certainly with you on looking at solutions. And what's interesting to me, what stands out to me, is that reformers often look to improve the system within the confines of Citizens United. That is, we have something like the Campaign Legal Center at the federal level, and they focus more on how to improve disclosure of campaign finance. And they also focus on how can we make sure that independent spending is truly independent, and that we avoid some of this background coordination. So for me, what stands out is that you're really looking for this 28th Amendment, which is like shooting for the stars, right? A little bit. You are basically kind of trying to swing for that 500-foot home run that's going to the upper deck, which is a hard thing to do, a very hard thing to do. So I admire your energy being at it for 12 years. But I'm wondering if you have thought about sometimes using your energy and trying to take some smaller steps within the parameters of Citizens United, or why do you think this is still the way to go for you?
Yeah, so it is going to be long term. In 1848, two women stepped up to the podium in Seneca Falls and started a movement that ended in 1920, suffrage, right? They had a bigger, steeper way than we have in the context of technology and meeting, and right? So yes, it's hard, and it should be hard. The framers wanted it to be hard. Article 5 makes it hard, right? But it's been done 27 times before. Why can't it be 28? So it's doing that. In the confines of other options, right? First of all, we believe, I'm hoping that some of you understand or believe it, we don't get an amendment. We are not going to win, period. Somebody has to be working for an amendment. That's us, this movement internationally. However, in the last 13 years, I've not been just doing this. I've spent more hours studying, taking college courses by video anymore now, and I've studied movements, and there are different players, actors in movements, and two of them are change makers and reformers. We are change makers. We work with the citizens and bring the society and the reformers, And American Promise is one of our partners. They work inside the system. So change makers work outside the system, the reformers work inside the system. And there are many. I can't believe how quickly reform groups are growing since 2010. There are scores of them around this country on different issues, and some of them are trying to pass laws to do it. And I tried to get Feingold in after he lost when he got started up, and he said, "No, George, I want to do it in the system." At that time, I didn't understand movement, and I was kind of, "Oh, why not?" Well, the point is, we need both. So we need people working at that level to make the change we need, as we work at the level that is going to prepare us to do, as they get the amendment, when society is ready. So this work means we will have to wait for the right trigger point, be prepared for the right trigger point, even if that takes 72 years, as it did for suffrage, until the things were just right during the First World War. That's why we're doing it the way we're doing it.
Yeah, thank you. That's certainly helpful. Because not everybody looks at this topic every day, I just want to mention maybe a few other options. Now that I focus more at the local level these days, we can certainly think about other types of reforms, such as public funding of campaigns. Matching funds is something that has been around for quite some time. There are also some more innovative ideas, such as requiring a disclosure with the top funders of an outside group and the paid by line in their ads, so that there is more transparency. Yes. So I'm just wondering if WIUTA could sort of play a role in making change at the local level by maybe adding some of those types of reforms to their agenda.
So no to that question, but yes to the point. So those of you who are familiar, one of the reasons that there was so much money in this Supreme Court race is redistricting the maps, right? When they started up, we helped them get started. And there's another group in Wisconsin working on getting different voting, right, as a final five voting. So this is what a movement is. This is what the let's fix this means. It's not just this amendment. We have to help those organizations that are doing that. Rather than take it internally, we support them to do it. But they're all important. That's the answer to your question. Everything's important.
Mm-hmm. Let me add a clarification question as far as these resolutions are concerned at the local level. You've had this one slide where you mentioned those two components. One of them said, money is not speech. So I want to come back to that, and I would think about what is the strongest argument that you could make that would also maybe perhaps resonate with conservatives as well as with the courts. I don't know what you think, but it seems to me that the idea of corruption and the appearance of corruption is something that could be maybe have a little stronger focus, right? Because if we say money is not speech, many would argue that money enables speech. In other words, your right to speak includes the right to spend money to speak. So restrictions on spending money to speak are restrictions on speech and therefore unconstitutional. How do you respond to this basic argument that it's not about money as speech, it's not speech, it's about that money enables speech? So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Supreme Court, the problem was, and it's in the rest of the language on that, we're not trying to get money out of politics. We want to get the politics reasonable, right? We want the governments to have the ability to limit it when it's going to threaten our country. So the situation as is now is that they spend $14 billion on ads and whatnot, and we can't get heard because they have to give back to that money. So money is, we want to make it not a constitutional matter. We just want it not to be that they can spend as much as they want. And as long as they can, we will not be heard. And so that's the argument that's going to go to the Supreme Court when the lawyers get up there with this amendment, whatever it is that this country's in trouble unless we locally can do that in a way that works.
Let me ask first 2 more questions, then we'll open to the audience. But let me, as far as the other component of your resolution, it states that only human beings are endowed with constitutional rights, not corporations, unions, nonprofits, or artificial entities. However, if we kind of look at the US Supreme Court and see how they have dealt with corporations, again, corporations is often, it's easy to think about multinational corporations that are gigantic. We also have to consider that corporations can be small entities, from everything from the NRA to small churches. So, for example, corporations have been granted Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. Otherwise, the police could just go and storm down the doors of any company and take all their computers and their files and say this is it. So, do you really want to take away protections like this from entities that have formed a corporation?
So long before, the what do I want to call it? The case that I talk about when I talk that history, I didn't get to talk it, I didn't have time today, is 1886. A railroad sued the county about taxes, and from that the Supreme Court said basically that a corporation is a person, therefore they have all of the ideas. Before that, and we're at the start of this country, and before our country, corporations did fine because the laws were that they didn't have these powers. For hundreds of years before they had these powers, maybe 1,000 years before, they didn't have the powers of personhood. And they had to, every 10 years, they had to get a new license. They had to get licensed. So they need to have the privileges that we give them. And we need to give them the right privileges so they can operate. But to give them constitutional amendments means that they can prevent things that they shouldn't be able to prevent. So they didn't have this until a certain years, and they did fine. I think they'll do fine as long as we as human beings realize they're important, and we need to make sure they're protected from that by laws rather than the Constitution.
Let me ask one more question. This one goes to a very recent bill that was just introduced maybe 10 days ago or so by U.S. Senator Josh Hawley, who is a Republican. So now it gets interesting, right? Because often we see bills introduced by Democrats. And this is called the Ending Corporate Influence on Elections Act. And what would it do? It would do 2 things, right? It would ban publicly traded corporations from making independent expenditures, something that you are concerned about, political ads, and other electioneering communications. It would also ban publicly traded companies from giving money to super PACs. That's exactly right, a concern that you have. So, do you think such a bill would significantly reduce the impact of outside spending? And do you think this is really a genuine effort to curb the influence of money, or is it more a type of, if you will, virtue signaling to some of the voters? It was also, by the way, very interesting to look at the reaction from Mitch McConnell. I don't know if you saw that in the news. He said that senators from his party who would support this bill would face incoming, I think is what he called it. And he is very strongly against such a bill. So another question, of course, then is why is there so much resistance among the establishment toward reforming campaign finance laws? But coming back to the first question too, what do you think about such, a bill like that?
So from what I heard, without knowing the bill, the Supreme Court will shoot it down. Period. Since Citizens United, there have been at least 5, if not 20, laws where states have tried to do controls, and the Supreme Court, when it gets there, said, in the first one, they basically said, we told you, you can't do this. So they're getting shot down when they get taken to the Supreme Court, and from what I heard, not knowing enough about it, that sounds like that will happen to that. But number 2, it's more than that. It's not just about elections. And let me give you an example. If you want to know about the money problem, the best book you can read, actually written by the president of American Promise, Jeff Clement, right? Corporations are not people. You want to know the story of the history of where we are, much more than I give, you read that book. There's the first book I read, and it got me sold. And one of the cases, and here's the important part, Massachusetts, right? Massachusetts he was Attorney General of Massachusetts at one point. I don't think he might have been involved in that or not, but in Massachusetts, the state wanted to pass a law prohibiting smoking advertisement next to middle schools because that's when they hooked them, right? So they spent 10 years getting a law passed by the state that you can have to be 1,000 feet away from a school for an ad. That's not that far, but it's a start. So the state passed it. The cigarette companies took them to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, you can't limit their speech. So it's not just elections. They have a trump, I shouldn't use that word, but this is a trump card, right? That the corporations have, and you go into the, not barging into the company. You hear about the salmonella and the peanut butter and stuff. And one of the cases they talk about is that the peanut butter company, they had some noise that they were doing something wrong, and they used to be able to. I guess they don't know it because I'm not following up. They used to say, we need to come in and see if your plant is clean enough or whatever. And they went up there and they said, well, you got to give them 6 months. Well, what's going to happen in the 6 months? The plant's going to be cleaned up. So it goes beyond elections, but I never bring that up until the case here that you're saying. And so these bills won't solve those kind of things either.
But would you say, has it become more difficult or easier in terms of speaking to more conservative legislators here in Wisconsin? Have you made inroads and progress, or do you see more walls going up? Since you've been going at it for 12 years now, I'm just wondering, are you making progress on the other side, so to speak?
So we're making progress where we can make progress, and it's not on the other side. So this legislature that's been in full control since 2010, right, have passed so many laws taking away our democracy and many things. For example, and I have a copy of anybody wants, I can send you the PDF done by the Legislative Review Board. Between 2010 and 2018, they passed 180 laws taking away the power of local government. You want to see that? I'll send you a copy of it, done by them, right? So they're doing that kind of thing. What did they do as soon as Evers got elected? Took away powers. So the answer to your question, we're not going to make any room with them. They're going the other way. We are going to build this to 1,700 so that when we get a balance in our legislature, that'll be our trigger point to the change. Until then, you're right, we got nothing.
With that being said, let's open up to questions from the audience. What questions do you have or comments? Yes, Art.
Yeah, I have a few comments. Considering I was the lead sponsor for Ripon here,
Yes, Art.
Thank you, Art. We passed that 78.8% was a positive vote that time. After that, I approached our state senator and our state representative at the time. They happened to be at a joint listening session, and I brought that up to them. And basically, they told me, we're not interested in it, we don't agree with it, and that was the end of it. Regardless of the fact that close to 79% of their constituents wanted that passed. You talk about public servant, are they public servants, or is the public supposed to serve them? What else do I have to say? Also, with regards to that 51 million for state Supreme Court, if I have my history correct, the previous, before things swung over to total Republican control, there was a law passed that would provide public funding for state Supreme Court justices in those races. That was one of the first things that got 86 when there was a new administration.
And there are many more art like that they've done. So we're building the power for the time when we get balance in our legislature.
And I think you could add to that, and just for the sound purposes, I will just mention that many of those resolutions, right, have been passed with overwhelming majorities.
So let me give you some stats
Yeah.
that'll help in the context. First of all, I preface it. The people of this country, left and right, so when I talk about citizens, I say conservatives and liberals. When I talk about people involved in politics, I say Democrats and Republicans. Because there's often a big difference, even though we only get to vote two ways, right? So, conservatives and liberals get together. The town of Lake Tomahawk is in Vilas County, and it is right about here, okay? We see we got a whole bunch done up there, right? And Kay Hoff was the art Basler up there, and she calls me up on Wednesday morning because we try to get media, and she said, George, you're not going to believe this. We voted 91% yes vote as a record. Art was just under the previous record, Art, it was 88. You were just under that in the Follett County, right? I said, wow, great. She said, whoa, George. As Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story. Now, you young people don't know who Paul Harvey is, but I bet you a bunch of you do, right? The rest of the story is we voted very heavily Trump and Johnson. These people that voted very heavily Trump and Johnson voted for this because the people get it. Our average now is 81%. Is the average of all voting now. It's been coming up every year. So the citizens get it, the citizens want it, the system doesn't want it. And that's the challenge we have, because we won't be bothered by them until we get power. So, and that's the balance. That's why it took women 72 years. Let's start getting power. Everybody fighting back.
And I think it's an important observation to make, because in our polarized society, it's hard to find topics where we see such great deal of agreement across partisan lines, right? So it's actually, people, as you said, do see this as a real serious problem. It's just a matter of how do we get out of it.
If you let me, I'd like to put a little icing on that cupcake. We now have had 5 communities that passed it at 91%. 3 of them were conservative, 2 were liberal. So that wasn't a one-off.
Yes.
I have a question about that. How do you get people to see the disconnect between voting 91% in favor of this amendment and also voting for Trump and Johnson? How do you get them to see that they are shooting themselves in the foot by doing that?
I don't know enough to answer that, and if I did know enough, I would say, I don't want to get into politics because we're going to argue about the nuance of it. I don't know the answer how to do that, and I don't have to do that. I got to get people to care for their country, and hope that they will help us build a movement, because these guys are going to keep us polarized, unfortunately. But that's part of the strategy, the 50-year strategy of where we are today. There's a 50-year history I have studied here that got us here today. It didn't happen this decade.
I'm not sure that voters always see this disconnect when you have leaders who run on platforms that are explicitly anti-elite. I am not part of the swamp, right? Trying to always create separation between them and what's happening in Washington, D.C. So we have people who run for, quite a few people who run for office by running against who is in office and against the establishment.
I won't get into it, then we're going to go to this gentleman, so we can put his hand up. I won't get into, my philosophy is, I don't talk about issues with anyone, because even if you agree, you start getting down to where you disagree, and it's polarized. And if you want to talk to people about this, I'm asking you to talk to people about this village movement. Keep it on the topic of this reform, and don't get into that, or you're going to lose them, right? Because you want to talk about what you do agree on. The 91% tell us you and them do agree on this, probably. So focus on that. And that gentleman in the right is trying.
Yeah, Dean Cisco.
If big money is a problem triggering point to move this forward, because this still benefits both parties.
Well, 22 states have found that balance. They're not all one party, some of them are, right? But the point is, we don't know we can, we know we can't until we have to. I don't know I can win this movement. I know we're in trouble if I don't try.
Thank you.
Let's go to Gary.
So,
This is fun.
all right. So we have this big influx of outside money, outside the regular political parties and so forth. I mean, is it all just one way? Can't they aren't there some of the big money as opposed to some of the other big money that they would fight each other?
Yes, it's an arms race. You can answer this question better than me. You wrote that book there that does that. So I'll let you answer it.
Yeah, so just going back to the most recent Supreme Court race here in Wisconsin, for example, I think this basically represents more or less the norm that nowadays in that race it was a little over 60% of outside money, a little under 40% raised and spent by the candidates, right? So nowadays what you often see is about not just 10, 20, 30% of this outside money, but it's like 2/3. 2/3 of all expenditures in that race come from quote unquote outside groups who cannot even talk to the individuals, right? So that's the issue of you are losing your own message as a politician, right? You just don't have that connection, and you have no control over what these ads are about. Most of the stuff goes into advertising, right? So that is a real problem. And in fact, when I looked at the local level, for example, and I looked at Los Angeles, I think it was city council elections, and I looked at it, what is the trend there? I saw that, and those elections are not cheap, so it's like, $2 million for a city council election is normal. So, but then it was about like 81% of that money was spent from the outside without any communication. 19% I saw from the candidates, which is a pretty wild sort of trend, right? What is the limit? There is no limit as long as you don't officially coordinate with those campaigns, right? So, to me, that's a really troubling trend that you're not in charge of your own campaign anymore. There's always two campaigns. There's your own campaign, and then there is a shadow campaign, and that shadow campaign may overshadow you. So I'm not sure it was answering your question, but overall that is sort of the trend that we see. Yeah, Art.
Yeah, one more thing is, the way that we did this here in Ripon is we were able to get the citizens to petition the city council to put that on the ballot. The last budget bill was that ability was taken away from the citizens of the state of Wisconsin, as I think it was supposedly a cost-saving measure, but you can't do that anymore. And now, I happen to be at a thing where Joan Baldwick was, and I asked her, I says, well, what about the idea of having binding referendums? Well, she did not want any part of that. And basically she said, well, I like representative government, where you elect me. Of course, again, seeing as big money's doing a lot of the electing, I don't know necessarily that I am represented at all.
Perhaps I can give one or two more examples as far as circumventing this coordination. This was part of the Supreme Court decision in 2010 that money does not corrupt because there is still this wall between the candidate and these outside groups. So again, if we take a look at looking at the local level, for example, and we go to Chicago, there are various candidates. This is called red boxing, where you go to the website and you will see across certain statements just like a red line, red box basically around it. And in this case, it is a signal to these outside groups, please use this message in your ads focus on this specific sentence or this specific message. So are you sending them an email or a phone call to coordinate these efforts? No, you're making it publicly available in a way that the average person would not really pay attention to, but you are sending these kinds of signals, right? And it has not been outlawed. I mean, it has been called out, but these are the kinds of things, right? So sometimes when you go to YouTube or other websites and you see strange footage that is just visuals without actually words on it, politicians shaking hands and those kinds of things, this is not meant for you, for us as citizens, as voters. This is meant for these outside groups to use that publicly available information to run their ads with these kinds of images. So, and this list goes on in terms of the kinds of methods groups are using to circumvent this coordination. It's the same as if I were to give an interview to a reporter or to a newspaper, and they were to ask me, what is the plan? Where would you like to, where do you want to spend your money going forward, in what states? Let's say you run for president. And you can just talk about, oh, I would love to see more efforts in these states. You are talking to a newspaper, not to the organization, so they can use that information for their own tactics and strategies on where to spend that money, right? So that list, or you can post a very detailed calendar of where you are and when, all these little details about your own campaign. The idea of posting these details is not for the average citizens, it's for outside groups to set up their own tables, to put whatever signature campaigns and all kinds of things. So again, they are not there, this is all publicly available information, but they are not coordinated, right? So that wall of the idea that there's no appearance of corruption, I think, is really problematic, right? Because there are so many ways to get around existing laws.
I think, again, it's too long ago for me, but you probably have more fresh in your mind as you think about it. That case, one of the arguments of the Supreme Court was that as long as the people can get information, we think that's good enough. That there'll be elections that work. And it's after they passed a law that the super PACs came into being. Pretty much, they were not there. And the dark money, right? That they don't have to report. And tell me if you think I'm wrong, because I'm going on stuff I read here. This could be wrong. But sometimes a corporation will give $1 million to a super PAC who can give that to a campaign because they can't give it to the campaign. And so this laundering am I right on that? And if I'm not, then
I think the rise of dark money is another byproduct of that decision, because one of the things we have to acknowledge is that super PACs have to officially disclose their donors. They have to disclose their donors. So it's not anonymous. However, now we can play financial pinball, and we can certainly create an organization, 501c4 organization, a social welfare group that gives that money to another C4, let's say, and then they will issue a grant to a super PAC. And ultimately, all we know is that one organization at some point of time gave it to the super PAC, but we don't know who's behind it, right? So there are a lot of ways to basically disguise of where that money actually originated. But officially, they have to disclose their donors, right? So it gets very messy and very laundered quickly. Paul.
After the 28th Amendment is adopted, so that only human beings can contribute to politicians, right?
No. So the 28th Amendment is step one to a lot of work after that, right? Women didn't, they got the right to vote, but they still don't have their civil rights totally, right? Point is, that now allows us to start changing the laws in a way that we can control and limit, not stop. So, yes, we can go back to, and by the way, if I'm right on this, I'm not sure, two things I remember about Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin is the first state to ratify suffrage. I'm not sure, I think I read that. Right, was it somebody shaking their head? Wisconsin was also, if I remember right, the first state to pass a law that corporations cannot contribute to campaigns. And then it was killed by the administration as soon as it was enacted. So point is, we want to get back to a reasonable area where they don't have all of the insanity we have, but not, so we could get back to where they can't contribute, which we had. But that's the details that we have to work out once we have an amendment that changes these two core things that are destroying this country. And our work changes once our state makes the call. Now our second job will be to make sure that our legislators try to pass the right bills, because what's going to happen is, once they're forced to do it with 34, they're going to try to pass bills that don't work, amendments that don't do anything.
Yeah.
What I think you were starting to address what I was going to get at there is that when only human beings can contribute, then we have the fact that income and wealth in the country is far from equally distributed, and so then money would still be able to talk quite a bit, right? Unless certain other limitations are then put in place.
So what are the 2 points in the amendment? Only human beings are constitutional rights, not corporations, unions. That one addresses the corporations. The second one addresses what you just said. Money is not speech, and therefore the government has the right to limit the money of the rich on the speech. So those two, we have to cover both of those, because you're right. If the rich could put all they want to it, they'll just get, corporations will give them money to do it. So those two needs to address those two flaws.
Let me just mention one more historical development of the last 13 years or so, which was that political parties basically screamed, and they were just totally frustrated in the years after Citizens United, because they realized, as an individual citizen, you are still limited in the direct check you can write to a candidate, right? So we still have spending limits on that front, but you can then suddenly write a $10 million check to a super PAC. And so parties were like, oh my gosh, we're losing power to these outside groups. And so the solution that they found was nowadays the 4 largest super PACs are all political party super PACs in Congress, right? So they are run by the party leadership. So they have built up their own super PAC structure as a result to compete with these outside groups. So it's become an arms race, not only between candidates and outside groups, but certainly parties have wrestled their way into the system. Yeah, there was a question in the back. Sorry. No?
If you want a bigger windmill to tilt at, have you ever thought about trying to go after the Supreme Court decision using the 14th Amendment to grant personhood to corporations? I mean, because if you could argue that they're not persons, then they don't have the right. I mean, that really is the theory that flows and provides the justification for much of the argument that, okay, you can't stop the speech of a person.
That's right.
If we consider corporations persons, then they have the right to speak and use their money to speech. But if we could has anybody considered? That's probably virtually impossible to do given the precedent. But has that ever been discussed as a strategy?
Well, the point is, the only way we can fix this is to change the Supreme Court's decision. That's the final word, unless we make an amendment. You can't tell them, you can't sue the Supreme Court to take away what they said that a corporation is a person. There's no way to undo that except through an amendment.
Or get different people on the Supreme Court.
And here's the problem. When I started this, we had a 5-4. We have 9. I have to get these numbers right. Yeah, we have 5-4, right? I would be given, and Democrats would say, yeah, but all we have to do is get 2 of them flipped over. Well, where are we today? Number 1, okay, that's not durable, so it's not durable, and then what happens the next time it flips over? So that's not a good solution that's durable.
Sure, Marty.
Can I follow up on that though? Because
I'm all for what you're saying, and as somebody that used to teach comparative politics, no other democracy allows this kind of unlimited spending. Canada doesn't, UK, France, Germany, Scandinavian countries. If you look today, the rating agencies of democracies rate Norway as the most democratic nation, and the US is way down the list and not even in the top 10, partly because of these oligarchic tendencies. However, Norway has amended their constitution over 310 times since 1813, when they got their first parliament that had real power. Over 300, we've only had 27, and 2 of those canceled each other out. We haven't had a significant constitutional amendment since 18-year-olds got the vote in 1971. So this is a symptom of a problem that our system, it was set up to prevent tyranny of the majority with all these checking items, but it has now become a tyranny of the minority, as we see in the state of Wisconsin. We see in the Electoral College, where a minority of people put somebody in as president, and then they use their overrepresentation of minorities in the US Senate to ratify ultra-conservative Supreme Court justices. So we have got even a much bigger problem than what you are attempting to do. And I'm not discounting what you're trying to do,
Right? No.
but you know, it's way beyond that now, and that's why I think our system is in very serious trouble.
I believe we're gonna have more autocracy if we don't fix this. I believe that, maybe like you won't believe that. And what we're doing is intentionally to be hard, and will be hard, and it is much worse. Just you're talking about the economists. Every year the Economist puts out a scale into it. I might even have the slides on here. And it's gone from 2005 to now. We are number 30, by the way, right? And every year we go down lesser, and we are in what they call a flawed democracy. So the top 25 are regular democracy. So we've got bigger problems that are getting bigger all the time. And the people that would put their bets, if I was putting my bets, we will fail. But I got a little grandson that says, George, it's worth that chance. That's what I'm asking you to think about.
We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Luther Olson.
Yeah, I lived this world for 26 years, so I know what this is about. What really is interesting is corporations. First of all, there's campaign limits on how much one person can get from anybody. So, you know, when I was in the Assembly, it was $10,000. In the Senate, it was $2,000. That was all you could get from anybody. The way the system works, and you guys have sort of talked about it, is independent expenditures. And independent expenditures are saying, I'm not going to give money to Luther or his opponent, but I'm going to buy ads that say, you know, Luther did this. If you don't like it, call him. They never say vote for him or vote against him. The problem that I see you having is, you know, they spend as much as they want. It's free speech. What's the difference between that and saying Coca-Cola saying you can only spend so much money on advertising for Coca-Cola or GM because they don't coordinate with any candidate at all. If they do, they get in serious trouble. And there's stuff that goes on. I think you guys are right with the PACs and stuff. Nobody knows where that money is coming from. And when I was running, I had a campaign treasurer that we had to fill out every dollar, even over $5, I think, toward the end, that we got, their address, what their name was. You can look on the election thing right now and see everybody who gave me money and how much they gave me. there's a bright line, and the law is a bright line between coordinated third-party expenditures. And that's what this stuff is. And I think you run into trouble trying to change the law says people don't have free speech. Corporations don't have free speech. You can't advertise your product. You can't say things about a candidate. You're not telling people to vote for them or vote against them. You're just, the bottom line is, call Luther and here's his number and tell him you like it or you didn't. And so they're very cagey about that. I think the thing that you're trying to do has much bigger ramifications for free speech in our country than just the political end of it. Because, like I said, that's a bright line between the corporations or rich people. I mean, if you look at George Soros or you look at, the Republican guys.
Edelson or something?
Yeah, all those guys. They have billions of dollars that they dump into, and they don't dump it into candidates, they dump it into issue ads. They're called issue ads. And everybody has the right to pay for an issue ad. Saying, I don't like this. It's not a candidate, it's just I don't like this, and those are issue ads. And that's why this thing is, you're fighting a big battle.
Actually, it's even worse than Luther explains it, because super PACs do not have to abide by the so-called magic word test that the Supreme Court issued, I think it was 1976, in a footnote where they said, once you start using words such as vote for, vote against, person X, Y, and Z for Congress, and there's a list of phrases, then this would start to corrupt the process. Super PACs do not have to abide by those. They can say whatever they want. However, Federal 1C4, like these dark money groups, social welfare groups, they still have to abide by those terms. Otherwise, they can lose their status. But even that is another issue. The FEC, the Federal Election Commission, is kind of a toothless tiger, because there have been a number of violations of the Penn laws, and that commission is basically dysfunctional, right? So they're not doing their job.
And one of the things you have to realize is, where is all this campaign money going?
Mostly ads.
The press.
That's right.
I remember when I got recalled, the money that was, I had to do some interviews in Madison TV thing, and I talked to the receptionist. He said, this is just like Christmas. We never ever sold this kind of ads during the summer for anything. She said the only thing that we were worried about is the campaign ads push their regular advertisers, the car dealers and all that stuff, off TV, because these things, and they get cheaper rates, for one thing. But the newspapers get the money, the TV gets the money, all mass media gets the money. So do you think they're really hot to trot to shut down this flow? I don't think so.
No, the media likes it. They make it rich, so.
Yeah.
So, thank you. So.
But yeah, just to turn this into a question, right? We do have libel laws, laws regarding slander for average citizens, for in other situations. Why don't we ever think about those kinds of laws for organizations who are engaging in political campaigns?
Outside of my wheelhouse.
The problem is, there's this much truth and this much lie in a statement. So if I can prove this is the truth and this is a lie, I won, because there's some truth in it. If everything is a lie, well then you can sue somebody. But if you say a truth or exaggerate it, you can't touch it.
And the other issue that you mentioned is really the issue of accountability, right? It's basically impossible to hold those organizations accountable, even aside from any legal action. And so often there's so many issues here, right? So what we see is this world of so-called PACs who just are being formed in the weeks prior to the election. So nowadays we have hundreds of those, and then they have to disclose their donors months after the election when nobody cares about it, right? So again, I think there is a whole world of ways to get around it.
Give me one number and I'll shut up. When I got recalled between my campaign and my opponent's campaign, the independent spenders and stuff, $7.2 million. That's what that race cost. I got a couple $100,000, he got a couple $100,000. The rest, we don't know who did it, where it came from, and the sad thing is, like you said, they took my message and ran right over. And the thing about it is, when you're running campaigns, you want to be positive. You want to tell people what you believe. What do those other guys do? It's always negative ads. They always have negative ads. That's what they do. And so my little money that I have to say, oh, Luther's a good guy, he did this, nobody hears it. Because it's like 1 minute to 10 hours of the other stuff. And when you talk about this stuff being out of control, I agree 100% that it is out of control, but the question is, how do you fix it? Every time we pass laws and do things to fix it, these guys are really smart, and they figure out how to twist it.
That's right. And we are going to keep doing the work, even though it's close to impossible, for 10,000 times as much as we discussed are wrong.
I want to thank you for your patience, your attendance, your questions. Thanks for coming today, and a big thank you to George Penn for coming today.